lenders, CPAs, and advisors, and we are here for another episode of PPP with Paul and Dan. The last few episodes have been more about the PPP loan application and forgiveness process. While we continue to be at a lull with updates and changes, we're going to pivot a little and talk about the certifications and expectations built within your PPP and EIDL loan documents. Some of them are catching people by surprise. Paul, why don't you give a few examples of the nuances businesses may encounter?
Well, Dan, several months ago, it was just a mad dash to secure all this CARES Act financing in the form of a PPP loan or an EIDL loan, really before the funding ran out. And, it ended up working out okay that we didn't run out of funds, but, the mindset, everybody was trying to get everything in as quickly as they could. Decisions were made fast, loan documents were signed, and money was dispersed, and in most instances, the money's already been used. But, in these loan documents, there were certain limitations that were placed on the company and its owners. And, it would take us 2 hours to talk about all these limitations. But, what we thought we'd do today is just spend time on a couple of these that have started to gain traction as of late, as owners have started to look at these and assess these loans after their money has really been dispersed. So, why don't we touch on the PPP loan first? There's a lot of merger and acquisition activity that's on the rise out there right now. Some companies really can't survive on their own, so they're going to go out and find stronger partners. And then there are going to be private equity firms or individuals that decide that this is maybe a great time to be a buyer and go out there and seek companies that may be looking for that partner. But, having that PPP loan makes that problematic. And folks might say, why? Well, this is a forgivable loan if we do all the right things. And that's true. But if you remember, there are certain certifications that were made by the owners, and they stated in these loan documents that they would not make any distributions of the company's assets that would adversely affect the financial condition of the borrower and or the operating company. Well, you might think that one is subject to interpretation. Well, this next one really isn't subject to any interpretation whatsoever. The pledge was made not to change ownership structure or interests in the business during the term of the loan. So that's pretty straightforward. So you'll actually need the approval of your lender and the SBA to get around that. Now, as we all know, the SBA is a bit preoccupied right now, and their response time, I think, is going to be a little lengthy. So you want to get with your banker as soon as possible, because you want to be able to build that time frame in, or make sure that you get forgiveness before you sell or buy that company. You just don't want to jeopardize that forgiveness. It's too important right now. So let's jump to the EIDL loan. The EIDL loan is the economic injury disaster loan, and disaster is the key word. You really can't use these funds to do things like expand your business. It was designed for companies that were in disasters at the moment. Another thing you can't do, you can't use funds to relocate without prior consent of your lender or the SBA. So let's say things are going well and you need to relocate to a larger space. While this loan's out, you can't do that. And if you remember, these loans have a 30-year maturity. So you want to think about those things as you're moving forward. If your company's strong enough to expand, then you might want to get with your banker and pursue a loan that's a standard 7A financing, which is an SBA product that will help you do these things you need to do without using the EIDL funds inappropriately. Because as we mentioned earlier, that was just designed to help companies sustain their everyday operations while they're going through this disaster. So you're probably a little confused. Well, that's understandable. Let me show you something. This is the standard operating procedure manual for the SBA. There's no way a normal human being can digest that. So my suggestion is let your loan documents be your guide. Go back to your loan documents. Those can be anywhere from 10 to 30 pages long. That's a whole lot easier read than trying to read this manual. Discuss it with your advisors if you need to. But, Dan, I used to have a teacher that would say this all the time, and I know she sort of messed up her metaphors here, and I always hated it when she said it, but she always said knowledge will set you free. And I think in this time she was right.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. All great information. I know there's not enough time to cover everything on this, but hopefully these few examples will be useful for business owners to be aware of during these times. With that, we'll wrap up this episode and see you next week for another edition of PPP with Paul and Dan. Thank you for joining.